Did you ever do a mistake at work? Surely I did lots of mistakes during the course of my career, many of them when I was young in the first years after graduating, but for sure even today as well. And I would argue that there's hardly any senior manager in any business role that you could talk to who would not have happened at least one or two or three major incidents, major mistakes, major problems that they were more or less directly responsible for. Mistakes at work are therefore nothing to be ashamed of. The question is rather, how do you deal with them if they happen, and how do you avoid them for happening again in the future? So this is exactly the topic I'm going to talk about today. So welcome to another coffee break here on my channel Firm Learning. My name is Heinrich, and on my channel I want to help you to become successful in the first years of your career. I'm going to address this topic in 3 steps. First, I'm going to share some typical mistakes that might often happen to some juniors, people in the first years of their career. Second, I'm going to share some strategies, what you can do if a mistake happened to you. And third, let me share some tips and tricks on what you can do to actually avoid mistakes in the first place. So make sure you watch until the end to see these strategies, which I find will be quite helpful for your daily life as well. One of the tips I will talk about is using checklists for repeated tasks that you will need to do frequently. And here actually I have a checklist that I used myself while I worked at McKinsey, prepared for you. So you can find it via a link in the video description. Check it out. So let's start talking about what some mistakes could be that might happen to you in your daily job. And frankly, these are all things that happened to myself. So I did these mistakes in the past, and surely there are many other things that you might do wrong at some point in your career. So first example, you were asked to bring handouts of a document to the meeting, but you actually forgot to print out the documents in time. And now you're sitting in the meeting without handouts, everybody's looking at you and need to admit that you did not bring them. Next, you created an Excel analysis with some client data, with some information that you received, and then you shared some results from that analysis with the client or with colleagues. And then at some point you find out that some formulas in the model were wrong, that your model had a problem, and likely the data that you shared is now inaccurate, potentially even significantly inaccurate. The truth is, this likely happens more often than you think. I remember a partner saying that she believes that likely there is not a single complex Excel model that is completely error-free. So if something like this happens to you, trust that you will not be the only one. Or maybe you're asked a question in a meeting and then you share the wrong information because you misremembered it. So here one example, I remember that in one past project I was once asked for the savings potential that we calculated for a specific measure that we were working on. And I believe I said something like, yeah, the savings potential is 20 million euro. But in the end, it came out that it was only 5 million because I just mixed it up with something else that we calculated. But in the meantime, this number was already communicated. This person I said this to communicated this further to other people in the organization. So surely this was quite an unpleasant situation when then it came out that this number was not actually correct. Along these lines, of course, many other things can go wrong as well. Maybe you missed the deadline for a piece of work that you needed to submit, or you actually have some spelling or grammar mistakes in any of your documents. All of these are just different examples of mistakes that could happen to you. And let me share one more anecdote of what once happened in a consulting project. So we had a big workshop and an associate was responsible for preparing this workshop. And the workshop was a lot about product line strategy, lots of numbers prepared for that. There were board level members attending this workshop. We as a consulting firm had also partners flying in for the meeting, attending it because it just was so important to the project that we were conducting. It was quite a complex session. There were numbers printed out on the wall on big wallpapers that then we were supposed to discuss with the clients. And after starting this discussion about 20 minutes into the workshop, it became clear that all the numbers that were prepared, that were presented, were actually wrong. So apparently that associate pulled numbers from a wrong financial year or something like that. And unfortunately, no one noticed until then at some point one of the clients noticed that. And surely this was extremely unfortunate and surely also extremely embarrassing for us as consultants preparing this session. So having said that, what should you do if actually a mistake like this happens to you? And one thing that really annoys me from the perspective of a manager is when I have the perception that the person who did a mistake does not really acknowledge it, does not really understand that the person made a mistake, does not really seem to care that that person did something wrong. So while it is not necessary to apologize for your mistakes, so also would not recommend that you say sorry that I did that, you should at least acknowledge that yes, you did something wrong, that yes, you understand that these things should not happen, that yes, you will work on this not happening again. Because if you don't do or say anything after you did a mistake, your team might get the perception that you don't really care, or that for you it's not even important that your documents are without spelling or grammar mistakes, that these things do not really matter to you. And this is surely a perception that you in general want to avoid. What's important as well though is to always keep things in perspective. So surely a spelling mistake or not bringing your handouts to the meeting, while it's not great, it's not the end of the world. So I sometimes see especially junior people really beating themselves up over really minor things. While of course these things are not great, they likely have happened to everyone at some point in their career, and surely this is nothing to be scared or to not sleep well at night or anything like that. But sometimes of course also more severe, more significant things go wrong, like in the example with the client workshop that I talked about. Surely the associate who prepared the workshop will not feel great about this and probably should really reflect and introspect on what happened, what led to this situation, why this mistake was done. Though in situations like this, it's also a question of good leadership to not only see the mistake at the associate or at the junior colleague or at the person actually prepared the things in the very end. Because in the workshop example, it was definitely also the failure of the project lead to not double check the numbers, to conduct some quality checks on the works of the associates. And it surely was also the responsibility of the partner to not really work with the team, challenge the team, to make sure in the preparatory call that definitely happened, make sure that everything is correct and the documents are in order. Especially in more complex situations that go wrong, while it might sometimes be easy to just point to one person who did something wrong, it is often rather the failure of the whole team. Different failures in how different levels of the team should collaborate and should quality check their work that then in total led to these issues. What's always important if you do a mistake is to actually be open and honest about it. And here again, let me share one anecdote from work. So there was once a situation where a project lead was sitting together with a board member and then also one or two other partners around. And then the board member asked the team, asked the project lead whether he already reached out to another client, a colleague of the board member, to circulate and talk about the results with that person. And in that situation, the project lead said, yes, he did that, right? He talked to that person, he circulated this information already with the person. But for whatever reason, the board member was a bit skeptical about that. So in the meeting, the board member called this client and asked the person whether such an interaction, such a meeting actually took place. And it came out that this did not happen. So that frankly, the project lead lied to the board member. And probably the project lead did not even intend anything bad. Likely he just wanted to cover up. They probably did not do this, which likely you should have done. Probably you would have directly after the meeting reach out to this other person and then share the numbers, share the data to get this in order. So while at that moment to the project lead, this likely just seemed to be a little minor cover up, the damage that then resulted from this situation was of course significant. The trust between the board member and the consulting team was directly gone, and certainly that project lead also faced internal consequences after this incident. So while sometimes you might get away with something, I would really recommend you to make it a habit of yours of always saying the truth, be honest, be open about what happened. Don't try dodgy things, covering things up, because it will come to situations like this where things can really hurt you, hurt your career, hurt of course the reputation of your firm, of your employer, and this is usually not worth it in the end. Now let me share one maybe a little bit sneaky hack that I once learned from a project lead whenever you did something wrong. And from this project lead I learned the principle that you should share good news always in writing, but bad news only verbally, right? So good news in writing, bad news when you did something wrong only verbally. And the reason for that is that if you did something great, you can write about this. Then maybe your team lead, other members of your team receive this as an email, for instance. They can potentially forward it around, forward it to other people in the organization, so more people learn about what you did, about the great things that happen. Surely this is what you want. Though the other way around, this is what you might avoid when you actually did something wrong, when you did a mistake, when you did an error. So yes, be open and honest about it. Maybe give a call to your team lead to disclose what happened, to think about what the next steps could be to rectify the situation. But try to do this verbally, in person or on the phone, but do not put this information in an email. Because again, if it is written in an email, then that person might forward it to other team members. Then more and more colleagues might learn about that. Or maybe half a year later, that person is going over his or her inbox and then suddenly this email pops up again and they remember the situation, they remember this mistake, this error that you did at the time, which they might already have forgotten if you just shared it with them verbally. So share good news in writing and bad news only verbally. So agree that this might be a little bit sneaky, but this still appears to be fair game to me and just a little hack that you can use in your daily work. Next, I will share some strategies that you can apply to actually avoid some of the mistakes that we just talked about. But before that, I would like to introduce you to the sponsor of this week's video, DXC Luxoft. Luxoft is a global digital strategy and software engineering firm that delivers IT and business consulting services to their clients. Luxoft at the moment has lots of open roles to fill both in Germany but also all their other offices around the world. So if you are interested in new job opportunities in IT or in consulting, I will leave links to their German and their international career page below in the video description. Luxoft focuses on the public sector, so they help the public administration to become more digital and improve their processes. At Luxoft you will have the opportunity to work together with federal governments, states, major cities and help them improve. To me, this sounds like quite an exciting opportunity, also with the potential to really create a positive impact for the public domain. They're looking for people at different experience levels with a passion for IT that want to grow into a more managerial, business-minded role. They also have open roles in SAP consulting and the SAP S/4HANA platform. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, check out the links to their career pages in the video description. Of course, the best way to deal with mistakes is to avoid them in the first place. So now let me share a couple of tips and strategies that you can use to avoid or at least decrease the numbers of mistakes that you do. The first is to work with checklists. So whenever you do a task repeatedly and this task is prone to errors, use a checklist with all the things that you want to regularly check before you hand in the deliverable. In professional services jobs like consulting, one thing where this for sure will be helpful are documents. In the beginning of my career, I often did minor mistakes in my documents, and for that I created a checklist that I always went through, that I always checked before I actually sent and distributed a document to colleagues or to clients. So if you're interested in this checklist that I use, you can actually download it. I will include a download link below in the video description. So I polished it a little bit, but at its core, it's really the checklist that I use while I worked at McKinsey. So I hope several of you will find it helpful as well. Feel free to download it for free, of course, via the link in the video description. Another tactic that you could and should use are checksums and plausibility checks in your Excel models. So as a consultant, you will very frequently work with models, often also write complex and large financial models. Here it's very important to include maybe one tab with different checksums, different plausibility checks, where you do calculations like, oh, probably the sum of all these figures should equal this other figure that you have there in the other tab. You do different checks like that, plausibility checks, because of course you will over time frequently change assumptions, change data inputs in such a model, and sometimes these changes can lead to certain elements of the model breaking, which you should be able to detect with techniques like this. Next tip is to print out documents. So surely here maybe people are different, but I can definitely say for myself, and I know that this is true for many other colleagues as well, that for me it is always much easier to spot mistakes in documents. So let it be grammar or spelling mistakes, but also content mistakes, things that just do not align, do not really fit, if I have the document printed out compared to just looking at it on a screen, maybe even a small screen on a small notebook. So whenever possible, especially for important documents, I would recommend you to print them out, have them there in front of you, go over it page by page and check every single thing, read everything just to make sure the document is fine, and by this you will likely spot all the last mistakes. And last but not least, one technique that is really highly effective if you work in a team and you jointly worked on a document is to, before you send it out, you sit all together in your team room, you project the document to the wall, and then the whole team looks at every single slide, every single page for a couple of seconds and try to spot any errors, any inconsistencies. And then you really go slide by slide and jointly have a look at it together to discuss this and to criticize this. So this, from my experience, is really a highly effective measure. Of course, you could just send it to everyone and tell everyone, oh, please read it yourself, spot the mistakes. But then likely not everyone will do this very diligently. If you have everyone together and just 100% focused on reviewing the document, here the chances are quite high that you will really find even the most minor problems on the slides. So of course, there will be many other techniques that you could apply as well. Here I'd love to have some tips from you. What are some strategies that you can share on how to avoid errors and mistakes in your work? Feel free to leave them below in the comment section. Just leave a comment, and I trust this will be helpful to everyone else reading the comment section as well. If you took any value out of this video at all, please destroy the like button for the YouTube algorithm, and also subscribe and turn on notifications to always be informed whenever I release a new video. And of course, also big thanks again to the sponsor of this week's video, Luxoft. Check out their career opportunities in the link in the video description. Again, if you're interested in the checklist, the document checklist, there's a link in the video description to that as well. And last but not least, I also want to say a big thank you to all the members of From Learning. Thanks for your support. This is very much appreciated. My name is Heinrich. I'm releasing new videos every single Saturday. So good weekend to all of you. See you again next week. Very much looking forward to that. So have a good day.